Bob. No,
Oh, okay, my name is Robert Simpson. I'm the program chair, and I'm pleased this evening to introduce to you, direct from Ohio, but they'll hold that against him. This is Chad Kister of Ohio University, not Ohio State. So
Okay.
take it easy on him. He's been, since he graduated more than 20 years ago, I guess, around 20 years ago, he's been doing a lot of trekking through the Arctic. He's written some books about the Arctic and about trying to be an activist to save some of the Arctic and how it's melting. He's going to talk this evening. He's also made a movie about the native peoples of the Arctic, and he's going to talk to you this evening about the Tongass Forest.
Thank you.
Chad?
How many people have been up into the Tongass National Forest? Go on. And where is it located at?
On the west coast of Alaska.
Yeah, in southeast Alaska. And you can see one of the towns, Sitgo, which is famous from the show Northern Exposure. But how many people know some of the other cities and small towns in this region?
There's a beautiful one up there named Haines that I visited for a couple days, and I really loved it.
Yep, there's Haines up in here and Skagway right across the way.
Is this where Bartlett's Cove and the Muir Glacier is?
Yeah.
Yep, that's
Oh,
down
we've been there.
in this area, I think.
We did a Sierra Club kayak trip there to the glacier.
Oh, great.
Juneau.
Yep, Juneau, the capital of Alaska, is in that area. Anyone know any of the other small towns? There's Ketchikan. It's not that many people in the region. It's about 60,000 people. And it's the largest of the national forests. It's about 17 million acres. And can you get the lights, please?
Right here.
And it's also the largest old-growth forest left in the United States. And it's almost 30% of the global temperate rainforest left in the world. Now, global temperate rainforests are an amazing ecosystem. They include the towering redwoods of California and also areas scattered throughout the world, most of which have been totally destroyed. There's only a few left. By far, the largest portion is in British Columbia and southeast Alaska. A little bit left in Washington, Oregon, and California, but by far the bulk of it, southeast Alaska and British Columbia. And there's 21,000 islands in the Tongass National Forest. It's an amazing place to see by kayak or boat, and it's a tourism mecca with the ancient forests and all of the wildlife that comes with it. And there's a lot of the people in the region live off of the fish and other resources like the salmon that are incredibly abundant in the tens of millions of fish, and also rock cod. There's also a lot of shellfish and salmon berries, and halibut get up to 300 pounds. Amazing fisheries in the region. And salmon and the tens of millions of fish return to this area to spawn. And salmon are an old-growth forest species. It has been scientifically proven, and it's been known by the native peoples for thousands of years. The salmon support a fishing industry of thousands of people in the region, exponentially larger than the logging industry. And the old-growth forest is what makes the salmon so abundant. And scientists have recently found that about 70% of the nutrients of the old-growth forest in the Tongass come from salmon, come from the ocean swimming up into the rivers, and they then lay their eggs and die. The carcasses are eaten by bears and eagles and other animals, foxes, wolverines, and then are pulled into the forest and dispersed into the forest. So it's a very symbiotic relationship. The forest, in turn, keeps the salmon creeks clean so that the salmon can spawn. And there's also black-tailed deer and native peoples. The Chimney, Haida, Tlingit, and other native peoples have lived in this region for thousands of years, building totem poles, and they still live in the region. And many of them are very concerned about the logging, But unfortunately, many of their lands have turned into corporations, and actually some of the worst logging has occurred on Native American lands, even though the traditional Native peoples are against it. It's a very unfortunate occurrence that happened with the Native Claims Settlement Act in the early 1970s. There's also a tourism industry that is also exponentially larger than the logging industry. 1.2 million people come to this region every year. A lot of them come by cruise boat, others go by kayak and other means. And again, it's the old growth forest that supports the tourism industry as well as the fishing industry, and that is what we have got to protect.
Oops.
Yeah. And already about 1 million acres have been logged in the Tongass, and the Forest Service plans to log another 676,000 acres. And even though more than 1.7 million people sent comments in favor of the roadless bill that passed under Clinton, the Bush administration overturned the roadless rule, and Obama has not restored it to the Tongass, though he has restored it to other areas. And we desperately need the roadless rule to be extended back to the Tongass, as 1.7 million Americans asked to be done more than a decade ago, so that we can protect the remaining areas in the old growth forest. Because when the forest grows back as second growth, it is completely different. You can't walk through it, the light does not penetrate the ground, so you don't get the understory, which is critical for the wildlife. And also critical is carbon. In the old growth forest, vast amounts of carbon is stored in the ground. Some of it in the roots, lots of it in the soil itself, put there by the ancient trees. When the ancient trees are cut, that soil is released for decades. This is some very new information. Scientists have just been coming out with these studies, and they've got to get out so people understand the vast numbers of reasons to restoring old growth. Even in the second growth, even though there are trees that are coming back, the carbon is actually being released. Even though some of it is being stored in the biomass of the forest, the carbon in the soil continues to be released for decades after the old growth forest is clear cut. Now with selective cutting, sometimes you can still retain some of that carbon, but by far the best is to leave the old growth forest that we have remaining intact, because of their incredible importance for both the ecology and our climate. Now, much of the forest cut has been turned into pulp. The forest cut in the last many decades, there was a pulp mill in Ketchikan and Sitka that were shut down in the 1990s because they were unprofitable, that caused an enormous amount of destruction, hundreds of thousands of acres logged for pulp in the decades prior. Now the wood is largely shipped to Asia, and we are putting our national treasure, giving it almost to timber industries, subsidizing the destruction, and shipping the logs to Asia. Many of them are sunk in the Sea of Japan, waiting until the price of lumber rises. We are exporting our national treasure. Much of the wood is cut and just left, like happened recently in Irhuna. They cut a vast amount of areas, just left the wood, because the timber companies find it so expensive to remove the wood. Often they don't even get it to market. They just leave the dead trees lying to rot, which you see all over the forest and washed up on the beach in devastated landscapes like this.